Breaking news from WPTV News Channel 5.
Former President Donald Trump pleading not guilty to all counts inside a New York courtroom today. You're looking at video on the left-hand side of your screen there of the former president boarding his plane at LaGuardia International Airport a short time ago. His plane took off about 4:20 this afternoon. So all eyes to the skies here in South Florida now, looking for the Trump plane to enter the airspace and around PBIA. This after stepping, of course, before a judge earlier today as a criminal defendant in that Manhattan courtroom. Donald Trump charged now on 34 counts of falsifying business records. Those charges stem from alleged hush money payments to two women toward the end of his 2016 presidential campaign. Mr. Trump now charged with conspiracy in that specific investigation. Manhattan prosecutor Alvin Bragg stepped before the cameras at a press briefing a short time ago, laying out his case against Trump. Again, the former president pleading not guilty to all 34 counts. We do expect to hear from Donald Trump once he lands here in South Florida later this evening. We have reporters assigned to all angles of this story tonight, from New York to PBIA to that Southern Boulevard stretch, that route the former president is expected to travel this evening after he does in fact land. But first, a lot to unpack here in studio. We want to get right over to our Michael Williams, looking through these 16 pages now of this now unsealed indictment. Michael?
Shannon, a lot going on here, and I have legal experts who'll be with me, and thank goodness they are, that we have lawyers and our political analysts. You talked about conspiracy. I must tell you that in the last few minutes, there's been an evolution of that. There was early talk of that, but as we read through the indictment, we don't see that specific word, and that's one of the discussions going on right now. There are 34 felony counts that relate to falsifying business records in the first degree. The facts of the case, the sentence that makes the most sense to a layperson, whether you agree with it or not, says the defendant, Donald J. Trump, repeatedly and fraudulently falsified New York business records to conceal criminal conduct that hid damaging information from the voting public during the 2016 presidential election. That alleged damaging information, an extramarital affair for which he allegedly paid $130,000 through his then lawyer to Stormy Daniels, and then put it down as business records. That is a violation at minimum of New York state law. I'm joined by Mark Schnapp out of Miami, a former federal prosecutor. I know it's first blush. I know you're seeing what I'm seeing just at the outtake. Strong case, weak case, something in between. First reaction.
My impression is it's not the strongest case. I would have expected a little more. I think that basically it's focused only on Stormy Daniels payments and various either checks or invoice payments, charges or ledger entries that were made in connection with that.
And Mark, and just in plain English for us lay folks, why in your mind, at least at first blush, would that not make this a strong case to pursue necessarily? There's a lot to go here.
I think the problem is that it's the way it's charged under New York state law would require you to, for it to be a felony, you have to be a false business record, and which is a predicate for to conceal another crime, in which case would probably be an election law crime, which of course is not spelled out here. So it's really a question of whether or not, you know, the false business record is a proper basis to really be a basis to charge, which is fundamentally a federal election law violation. So I think that's a real tough issue.
Very briefly, the DA there, Alvin Bragg, said New York state election law makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy through unlawful means. The argument being that these payments that were then falsified as business records under New York law do that. Again, is that enough to prosecute on in your mind as you look at this right now? Because you're not the first one raising some concerns about how tough this is going to be to pursue.
I think it's still a problem. I think no matter how he characterizes it, what you're really talking about is ultimately a violation of federal election laws. And if you're going to say it's a conspiracy or call it that, you still at the core is a federal election law violation. Why is a state prosecutor looking at this? I think that's going to be an issue.
And the feds took a pass on it. We should note that at least. He defended that, said new information came to light. Very briefly to that point, though, in terms of the violation of election law and where we go from here. Your sense of it in terms of the word conspiracy, there was a lot of talk in court, but at the end of the day, I don't see the word conspiracy mentioned in there. Am I wrong? Or let's have the lawyer take on that, because there was some surprise that that's not mentioned. There's no conspiracy charge spelled out, at least from what I'm seeing.
No, it's not. It's not mentioned at all. And normally, see, the key of an indictment, it has to give notice to a defendant as to what the charges are. And I'm having a problem. I'm having some problems as a fairly experienced lawyer, seeing what the notice is to the defendant as to what the second violation really is.
Mark Schnapp, we're going to be with you all evening long. Former federal prosecutor, longtime private practice in South Florida. Stay with us. We're going to go to our News Channel 5 political analyst, Brian Crowley, right now. The political equation, Brian, this case may not even go back to court for another hearing till December. We'll be deep into the almost pre-start of the 2024 campaign. Your first blush reaction to all of this from the political side of that?
Well, when Donald Trump returns to Mar-a-Lago this evening, it's a brand new, historic, and fascinating campaign for the Republican nomination. On the one hand, I suspect that the humiliation of being fingerprinted in the Manhattan courthouse is going to want him to come out somewhat angry tonight. But his attorneys are going to be warning him not to say anything that could hurt his criminal case. So for a campaigner who loves to do all he can and be as aggressive as he can, this is going to be a whole new moment for him.
This is unusual. You and I have talked about it. Somebody who's going to use a criminal indictment to bolster his case for the presidency. Already doing that. His sons have already said, what's going on in America? I'm paraphrasing slightly when something like this happens. We've seen him bring in millions in new campaign donations. We've seen that at least in polls right now, so super early, he leads other Republicans nationally, though Ron DeSantis may have a slight edge in one poll in Florida. All that's part of the dynamic of how this plays out. And we'll get a first sense of how he attacks that from a political point of view tonight.
Yes, and even as he was walking into the courthouse, his campaign was sending out a tweet for Trump text message to everyone and encouraging their support. They're already doing a little bit of fundraising. They've already raised over $8 million for his campaign as a result of this indictment. So we're going to see a lot more of that in the days and weeks to come. And it creates a really serious problem for the other candidates, especially Governor Ron DeSantis, who is the front runner of those opposing him, Donald Trump. And this is going to put him in a very precarious position, as a lot of sympathy on the Republican side is going to be going to Donald Trump tonight.
And Brian, we'll see what he has to say to supporters at Mar-a-Lago. There was an admonition, not an order, an admonition from the judge to be careful of language that many have said, many of the former president's critics have said, stepped over the line towards potential violence. His lawyers argued vociferously outside the courtroom that was not the case. Nonetheless, bottom line, you expect to see a muted or full-on Donald Trump tonight at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, his former attorney general described Donald Trump as somebody who can't control his mouth, and a lot of the people who ever campaigned with him have said the same thing. Whether or not a criminal indictment will help him to control the things he says in his own best interest, from what his lawyers will tell him, we'll see.
Brian Crowley, you'll be with us throughout the evening. It's worth noting this is just one of many legal investigations that are confronting the former president, from classified documents at Mar-a-Lago to January 6th, on and on and on. So all of this, a brand new historic landscape. And mix that in with the politics of the moment in 2024, and we are in unique territory. Every analyst agrees. Brian, thank you, and Shannon, we'll throw it back over to you.